Imagine a world where the United States never became the United States. A world where the 13 colonies never unified under one constitution, but instead pursued their own destinies as independent countries. No Washington, D.C. as a federal capital. No single American dollar. Number 50 starred flag fluttering over a unified continent. Instead, 13 separate sovereign nations with their own laws, currencies, foreign policies, and possibly even different languages and alliances. This isn't just a historical what if, it's a deeply revealing scenario that uncovers just how fragile and improbable the American Union really was. Let's travel back to the 1780s. The American Revolutionary War has ended, and the British have been defeated. The 13 colonies, New York, Virginia, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland, now stand at a crossroads. Though they had united to fight the British Crown, unity in war doesn't mean unity in peace. Under the Articles of Confederation, each state retained its sovereignty. There was no strong federal government. Each state could print its own money, set its own tariffs, and manage its own affairs. Disputes flared constantly. Trade wars erupted. States were more like rival countries than cooperative partners. In this alternate timeline, the U.S. Constitution of 1787 fails to be ratified. Maybe powerful anti-federalists like Patrick Henry and George Clinton succeed in stoking fears of centralized power. Maybe economic differences between industrial North and agrarian South become irreconcilable. Or perhaps the idea of state sovereignty proves too intoxicating to surrender. Whatever the cause, the push to form a stronger union collapses. The consequences? Monumental. First, let's consider domestic stability. The newly independent states would likely form regional blocs. New England, comprising Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, might coalesce into a tight-knit alliance, perhaps resembling a Scandinavian-style union. They shared cultural, economic, and religious ties and had long harbored dreams of autonomy. New York and Pennsylvania, both economic powerhouses with large populations and strategic geography, could become regional hegemons. The South, with Virginia at its core, might rally into a loose confederation grounded in plantation agriculture and slave-holding. But these blocs wouldn't be harmonious. Border disputes would erupt. Remember, even under the Articles of Confederation, states squabbled over land claims in the Ohio River Valley. With no federal government to mediate, these disputes could lead to war. Imagine New York clashing with Pennsylvania over control of trade routes. Or Virginia and North Carolina entering into a violent dispute over land or tariffs. And speaking of trade, commerce would be a nightmare. Different currencies. Different tariffs. Competing regulations. States might impose border checks, customs duties, and restrictions on out-of-state goods. Interstate commerce, the very engine that fuels the modern U.S. economy, would be crippled. Instead of a massive single market, North America would resemble a patchwork of competing economies, like Europe before the EU. Economically, the region would stagnate. Foreign investors would face uncertainty with multiple governments, legal systems, and currencies. Infrastructure projects like transcontinental railroads or interstate highways likely never built. The South, still dependent on slave labor, would fall behind industrialized New England or the mid-Atlantic states. Income inequality between these new nations could deepen. The American economic miracle might never materialize. Now let's zoom out. What does this fractured North America mean for global geopolitics? Let's start with Britain. A disunited former colony would be a dream come true. London could reassert influence over some of the weaker states, especially those economically dependent on transatlantic trade. Perhaps Georgia or South Carolina becomes a British client state, granting the empire a foothold in North America once again. Britain might even regain military bases or trade ports in the region. France and Spain would also look to capitalize. Spain, which still controlled Florida and large parts of the West, could expand its influence inland. France, eager to regain lost prestige after its own revolution, might ally with New England or Pennsylvania. European-style balance of power politics would dominate the continent. The lack of a unified American military would have enormous consequences. In our reality, the United States developed one of the most formidable militaries in the world. But divided, each state or bloc would only have modest defense capabilities. Foreign invasion or colonial reassertion would be more likely. Native American nations, who suffered immensely under U.S. expansion, might retain more territory and sovereignty in the absence of a westward marching federal army. Manifest destiny? Forget it. Without a centralized government to purchase Louisiana from France or negotiate Oregon with Britain, westward expansion would stall. The Louisiana Territory might be purchased by only one or two states, or not at all. California might remain under Spanish, then Mexican, control indefinitely. Texas may never join a United States, because such an entity doesn't exist. The idea of a coast-to-coast democracy vanishes. And then there's slavery. In our world, the issue of slavery exploded into a civil war between North and South. In this alternate timeline, some states abolished slavery early, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Vermont, while others entrench it further. Without a national abolition movement, slavery might persist in parts of the South into the 20th century. There would be no Emancipation Proclamation. No Civil War. No 13th Amendment. And no Reconstruction. Social progress would be disjointed. Civil rights movements, women's suffrage, labor rights, these would develop unevenly across the 13 nations. One state might allow women to vote by 1890, another not until 1950. Some states could adopt progressive labor laws, others remain locked in Dickensian conditions. And think about immigration. In our timeline, the US was a beacon for immigrants. But would immigrants be drawn to a fragmented North America? Perhaps only a few of the 13 states open the doors. Others might be protectionist or even xenophobic. The cultural melting pot we associate with the US today might be limited to one or two enclaves like New York or Boston. Technology and innovation would suffer. The US government played a huge role in funding R&D, from NASA to DARPA to the interstate highway system. Without a central government, such national initiatives wouldn't exist. Innovations like the Internet or GPS might never emerge, or be developed by another power like the USSR or the EU. Silicon Valley, which benefited from massive federal investment, might never have taken off. Even pop culture would look different. Hollywood might never become a global behemoth. Instead, different cultural hubs, Philadelphia, Boston, Charleston, developed their own industries, with limited global reach. There would be no American dream, at least not one universally recognized. The Cold War. If it happens at all, it plays out differently. The USSR wouldn't face one united superpower but a divided North America. There's no Truman Doctrine, no Marshall Plan. Europe might drift into the Soviet sphere. China could emerge as the dominant 20th century power. The space race. Likely won by the USSR, or not waged at all. And nuclear weapons. It's possible that no single North American state would have the resources to develop them. Or worse, multiple small states might each pursue their own nuclear program without international oversight. That's a global security nightmare. Now let's consider modern times. In the 21st century, North America is dotted with checkpoints, tariffs, foreign embassies, and military alliances. Instead of one US passport, there are 13, or more. People move between states, as if crossing international borders. Trade deals are hashed out in a web of overlapping bilateral agreements. A regional crisis, like a hurricane or economic crash, might be too much for a single state to handle without outside aid. And elections. There would be no US presidential race dominating global headlines. Instead, each country would have its own elections, parties, scandals, and leaders. No single figure like Biden, Trump, or Obama to dominate global discourse. At this point, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Would a fragmented America be better or worse? Drop your opinion in the comments below. Do you think any of the 13 states would have become global powers on their own? Now, let's pivot to the ripple effects beyond North America. In our timeline, US foreign aid, soft power, and economic influence have helped shape the modern world. A disunited America wouldn't bankroll the post-war recovery of Europe or lead the founding of the UN. It wouldn't be a pillar of NATO. The post-World War II international order might look completely different, with a greater role for European empires, the Soviet bloc, or China. And global language. English might still be widespread, but without American pop culture and digital dominance, it might not achieve the same global supremacy. Spanish or Mandarin could rival it more strongly. Environmental policy. The US has often dragged its heels, but it's also funded key research and participated in international agreements. 13 squabbling states would make global coordination even harder. Climate change efforts might stall even further. Here's a surprising twist. Eventually, some of these 13 countries might try to reunite. Shared history, culture, and economic interdependence could push them back toward union, like a North American version of the European Union. But even then, it wouldn't be the same. The window for forming a superpower would have passed. The global stage would already be dominated by others. Imagine you live in one of these hypothetical 13 nations. Which would you choose, and why? Would you live in industrialized Massachusetts? Diverse New York? Agrarian Virginia? Let us know in the comments. In the end, this alternate timeline reveals just how improbable the US experiment really was. Unity wasn't inevitable. It was a choice, forged in compromise and held together by visionaries. If history had gone just a little differently, the world's most powerful nation might never have existed at all. So the next time you see that 50-star flag, remember, it could have been 13. Thanks for watching.